Hi everyone, this is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn, and together with chesslecture.com I'd like to welcome you to today's video. Now today I'm going to present to you a beautiful win by none other than the current world champion Magnus Carlsen in the biggest, or one of the biggest tournaments of the year, FIDE World Cup. And he's playing a veteran, Dreev, who is no fish and no walkover by any means, and he's an extremely solid player. Yet Carlsen plays a really interesting opening idea, basically pushing his A pawn all the way to A6 and eliminates Dreev without a fight. Let's take a look. E4, C5. Of course, Dreev chooses the more aggressive opening, the Sicilian defense. Knight f3, D6. But Carlsen is not interested in playing D4 and trying to get a complicated struggle. Instead, he has a very interesting idea in mind. Bishop B5 check. This has been pretty trendy. Knight D7, again, avoiding trades. And here, A4. Wow, this is really modern chess. 100 years ago, when you play the move A4, people will look at you funny. What the heck are you doing? Well, nowadays, chess players are evolving, they're really creative, and Carlsen sets up a really beautiful idea. So let's see what happens. Knight f6 is logical, hitting the pawn. Knight c3, g6, also logical move to go bishop g7 castles. And look at that. A5, he's not even interested in castling. Wow, what a remarkable idea. Okay, so black says, I'm going to continue development. Well, Carlsen's not satisfied with the pawn on A5. A6. Wow, truly amazing. Out of the first 7 moves, 3 pawn moves were A4, A5, A6. Can you really play chess like that? Well, the world champion says yes. And Dreev, who is extremely experienced player, doesn't have any clue how to handle this move. So he again plays logical chess, castles, castles. Obviously, taking on A6 is exactly what Magnus wanted. Now we have a permanent weakness, static problem, easy play for white. This, put the queen on A1 and just start tripling up on the A file and put tons of pressure. So understandably, Dreev doesn't want to deal with this. He plays E6, D3, queen B6, forcing white's hand. Magnus takes, and bishop takes B7. So let's stop here for a second and evaluate this position. Well, white made A4, A5, A6, A takes B, just to trade the A pawn for the B pawn. Yes, he has created this weakness, but he lost a lot of time. Black has pretty harmonious setup with 2 beautiful bishops fianchettoed. Yet, surprisingly, it's not obvious how black should play this kind of position. Magnus just plays in the same style, positional chess, solid chess. Rook E1. He says, bring it on. And Dreev is in the must-win situation. Remember, guys, World Cup is elimination. This is round 2. Carlsen won the game with black, and now draw actually is a good result for him. So Dreev really needs to start thinking about how he can blow up in the game, and he gets ready for the central push. Rook D8, putting the rook and the queen on the D file, X-train, getting ready to push D5. But Magnus says, you know what, I'm not afraid. Again, typical solid move, bishop A4. Dreev says, okay, I'm not quite ready to open things up. H6 to stop bishop G5. Magnus says, H3, bring it on. Alright, so notice the strategy. White is not really doing much. He's already satisfied with this long-term weakness. He's just waiting for black to blow open the center. Well, you don't ask Dreev, who is a must-win situation, to blow open the center. He's going to do it himself. D5. Looks like an X-clan move. If e takes d, basically black's getting tons of play, two bishops are alive, the center is mobile, dream position, right guys? Well, Magnus had something else to say about this move d5. There is a very strategic risk behind this move d5. See if you can figure it out. And for this you probably need to pause the video if you really want to solve it, how you can set up the beautiful blockade in the center to kill those bishops. It's a strategic masterpiece by white, and I really like what Magnus does here. And the move is e5 X-clan. Well, Dreev anticipated that move. He drops the knight back, and now this d4 idea looks like imminent. The bishop's gonna get alive, the knight's under attack, black's getting tons of counterplay, yet Magnus saw this far and he neutralized this idea with a beautiful strategic concept. First we take the knight, and then we set up a powerful blockade in the center. d4 X-clan. That's it. With just a few moves, white again proves that he's a better player. This bishop is dead, this bishop is dead, and the game is now very static. Not much is gonna get opened up, and the two knights will dominate on those dark squares. It kind of reminds me a little bit of the French. So Dreev decides, I gotta open up the game by any means necessary. He takes the pawn. Of course, white can simply take with the knight and control all the key squares, but Magnus is not satisfied. He really wants to put the pawn on c3, and the knight on c3 is on the way. So I like what he does. He's like, I'm not in a hurry. Knight back to e2, I'm gonna put the e knight to d4, I'm gonna play c3, solidify all those dark squares, and then squeeze black little by little until black runs out of oxygen. Positional play at its best. Dreev is again a very experienced player. He realized that once the knight comes to d4, it's game over. He needs to sack the pawn. d3. I think this is the best practical chance. Queen takes and d4. That was the point. The bishop is alive, but at the cost. And the cost is a central pawn. Again, Magnus is extremely good not only in positional chess, but in tactics. So now the game enters a new territory, where white has to defend for a little bit, but Magnus displays amazing tactical qualities. He simply takes the pawn. A lot of you may think, wait a second, can't you just take on f3 and win on the pin? But you have to keep your eyes open. The key is the rook is on d7, meaning that this guy is unprotected. Taking the knight is no good. After queen takes, the rook's under attack, followed by c3, easy win by white. So little tactics like that are really kind of the highlight of this game. So okay, black says, I'm not in a hurry yet, I'm going to play g5. The idea is quite nice. Knight f8, knight g6, put pressure here, bring the rooks. Again, try to activate his pieces. Well, Magnus says, simple chess, c3, knight f8, and now knight h2. Everything's protected, and he really wants to play knight g4 and tell this king, hello, I've got some really nice squares to work with. Notice how the center, it's very important guys, is quite beautifully protected. Alright, Dreev decides to follow through with his plan. Knight g6, queen g3, getting out of the pin while protecting the e-pawn. Obviously taking on e5 will only favor white, two pieces for the rook. So Dreev plays knight h4. Well, g2 is a little bit tender guys, so you have to be careful. Well, Magnus says, I'm gonna trade, knight takes, and now rook d3. Again, active play at its best. Black is doing everything he can to get counterplay. Now there is a pin, this bishop is really putting lots of pressure. Also, queen on b6 is pinning the pawn on f2, and it looks as though, finally, for the first time in the game, the world champ is under pressure. But that's not the case. Magnus once again one step ahead. And now he comes up with an amazing idea. h4 X-clan. It turns out that Black's king is more in trouble than his white counterpart. Why is that? Well, let's take a look. The g pawn's under attack, so pawn takes, queen takes, bishop takes, pawn takes, and here it looks as though rook takes f3 is a killer blow, and that's exactly what Dreev played, thinking that, aha, I've got you now, Magnus. Okay, so now the pawn on f2 is pretty weak, the king is wide open, potentially this other rook is going to enter the game, maybe via g8 square, but Magnus, again, little tactics, he sees this next move immediately. Again, imagine there's no bishop on g7, then queen g4 will be double attack. So simple chess, I take the pawn. And now we realize that black is probably lost. So this is what Magnus saw. If bishop takes, then queen g4 check, f2 is guarded. The threat is, of course, bishop takes g7, king takes, and then queen g4 check. And it looks like black is busted, but Dreev finds at least some way to keep the game going with f5. Magnus is not even thinking about taking en passant, he simply takes here. And now the last move, but very effective move of the game. Let's see if you can find it. Of course, white can play queen f6 check, but don't forget f2 is under a lot of pressure, and we really need to bring our rooks into the game. So why don't you try to pause the video and see if you can find the beautiful finishing touch, setting up beautiful attack by white. It's a quiet move, yet the threat is super strong. And again, if you need more time, go ahead and pause the video. And the world champ delivers. King h1. What an amazing quiet move. There is no stopping rook g1 check. By the way, rook h8 looks like it's a win, but in reality, after rook here forces the king to leave protection of the rook, and after queen takes h8, it's game over. So that's it. That's all there is to it. Dreev has been eliminated, and Magnus Carlsen is victoriously marching to round 3 of the FIDE World Cup. So far, he is perfect. He won every single game. He's as confident as ever. And I honestly, if he keeps playing like this, I don't see anybody stopping him. So, in the meantime, really pay attention to this a-pawn push. It may get popular, and if you really need a good weapon against the Najdorf, I highly recommend that you try to play like the world champ, and maybe you can win a few games. Thank you very much. This is Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn for ChessLecture.com. Goodbye.